I'm going to introduce you.
Go for it.
And if I might do a separate introduction, as I say. But hello and welcome to the Careers Beyond Teaching podcast, the show where we aim to showcase where a career in teaching can take you. I'm here today with Alex Tanner, who is a science teacher before moving into educational charities. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to start at the beginning, as I usually do. What made you get into teaching?
So I got into teaching because of my housemate at university. So I was in third year and I was just finishing my degree in bioveterinary science. I knew I didn't want to go into veterinary medicine because it was really expensive. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my housemate, AJ, had turned around to me and said, "Have you ever heard of Teach First? It's great, you know, they're trying to change education, they're trying to help kids, it's amazing." And I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never heard of it." She went, "Come along to one of the talks they're doing that the university was running for their careers." So I went along and it was really fun, and I thought, oh, do you know what, this actually seems I'm always chatting constantly, so it seems like it would fit my personality quite well. So I'll give it a go, and applied and got a phone call. It was on the 5th, I remember the call as well, it was on the 5th of December. I got a call saying, "Yeah, you've done it," and I was really excited. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
So you went straight from uni into Teach First?
Straight from uni into Teach First, yeah.
And you weren't sure you wanted to be a teacher before the...
Not until I had that careers conversation. So it wasn't until we did that, and I remember watching, they showed us some of the videos about what Teach First was trying to achieve. I went and did some work experience and got to see incredible teachers working with kids, and I guess seeing children learn stuff is one of the most exciting things to do. Like, it will never not be enjoyable to have a child turn around to you and say, "Oh my God, I understand it now."
Yeah.
It's one of the best feelings, and so it was going through that I thought, yeah, I actually would really enjoy giving it a go. And I remember chatting to my mum and saying, "God, I'm not sure." It felt like such a big step because it was my first job. And I remember her saying, you know, this doesn't have to be the only job you ever do in your life. This is just one kind of milestone in many, many milestones. So.
And that was, was that work experience you did with Teach First, or was that something you just decided to do beforehand?
With Teach First, yeah. So I'd said to them, I'm not too sure. Could I go and have a look in a school? And they said, here are some schools that are nearby to you. Here are some of the Teach First teachers. Reach out and go and see what you think.
Cool.
Yeah.
Because when I did Teach First, which was in 2018, started, that was a requirement. So before you do the training, was to like go to schools and
so it was
observe.
So it was a requirement for us as well. But I wanted to kind of go and have a little bit of a look first before I was just very cautious. And thought, I just want to go and have a look, have a see for a couple of days, and just decide that was definitely something I wanted to do, which I did. And then I went and did, was it
Summer Institute? Yeah,
so we did WSE, I think it was called, the week school experience.
Okay.
And then we went and did Summer Institute, so I started that. So I was a 2013 cohort, so we did it, June, July, something like that. Yeah, for 6 weeks, which was really fun.
You enjoyed it?
Oh, I loved it, yeah.
Did you enjoy your training year? Did you enjoy starting teaching?
I had very high highs and some real lows.
Yeah.
It was really fun. It was very challenging. I think overall it was like being thrown into the deep end. I wouldn't say that Teach First as a training route is the route for everybody, and I've had friends of mine that I met at the Summer Institute that went into Teach First to train, that then moved on and trained on another route. So one of them did a PGCE with the University of Chester. They are an incredible teacher, they're still teaching now. That was just a better route in for them. I really enjoyed going straight in because it suited me really well, just hitting the ground running and going for it.
Yeah.
I thought that the support that I received was really good and the school was great. I found it mentally exhausting. I think I remember my first observation I had from my academic tutor So you'd have your LDO, and then you have your academic tutor that will assess you at the end. And I was told that if I didn't rapidly improve, I'd go on a cause for concern.
In your first year?
In my first year, my first assessment. So that was that was in beginning of November.
Did it go really badly?
It went really badly.
But that's the thing, because if you don't know, when you're teaching, you're assessed basically sporadically through observations. So if that observation goes badly, you're deemed a bad teacher.
Yes.
And if they go well, you're deemed a great teacher.
Right. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that idea that it's just a snapshot. Like 1 hour is going to tell you if you're really good at teaching or not. But I remember just having my confidence really badly knocked from it. And I really considered whether teaching was something that I should keep going with. And thankfully I did, and the school was brilliant at providing a lot of support. And my LDO was also great at providing me with a lot of support to kind of pull my socks up.
What happened in the lesson? If that's...
From what I can remember, I had all of my timing went out of the window. A kid tried to sneak an iPad into their bag to take with them. There was, I think, nearly a fight in the back of the class.
Yeah.
I couldn't manage the class at all because I just had no confidence to be assertive with a group of kids, because I found it very difficult. I found it really hard accepting that at my age I could be responsible for 30 children and command their respect of 30 16-year-olds.
21 years old. You were. And they just expect you to walk in and I remember my first lesson, I was just standing there and there was no one in the room with me. I was like, am I really am I in charge?
I remember my first ever lesson, the kids were all lined at the back, so as you do, you line them all at the back because you've got your seating plan.
I was advised to do that, and I would not share that advice again.
No, never again. And I remember one of them, just one kid, actually turned out that was probably my favourite class I've ever taught. I remember one kid just putting their hand up and going, "Where are our books?" And I just went, I don't know. I just had no idea. I didn't even think that you had to get exercise books for the lesson. And I thought, oh my God, these kids are going to eat me alive.
Yeah. So highs and lows in your training year.
Yeah.
How long were you actually a classroom teacher for?
I was a classroom teacher for 3 years. So I was with my Teach First school for 2 years, and then I moved to Greater London, and I was at another secondary school for a year. I took on an additional responsibility. So I was a Key Stage 3 science lead whilst I was there. So I did that for a year, and then as I was going through, I just had I had a feeling of being a bit torn, because I really enjoyed teaching, but I'd done it for, this was my third year going through sort of doing the same thing, same process, and I was enjoying it, but I felt like I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to see what else was out there. I wanted to, I knew that I wanted to stay working for Charities. I loved the mission of Teach First. I think it's brilliant what they want to do, and I wanted to see, can I do more than just working in a classroom to make it happen?
So what were your options at that point, if you remember?
Options were staying at the school and just keep going, keep being a classroom teacher, and sort of work up the ladder, or I needed to find out what else I could do. And actually, the biggest hurdle that I've had so far was getting a job outside of the classroom. That first, getting my foot in the out of the door and into someone else's door, but getting my foot out of the door and trying to sort of get people to take me seriously outside of being a teacher, but also trying to figure out what transferable skills I had. I was so used to just being a classroom teacher and going, I know how to plan lessons, I know how to manage a room of kids, so how do I take those skills and demonstrate I could do something completely different? It was really hard.
I find that really interesting and baffling at the same time, because you do have a lot of transferable skills as a teacher, and I'd imagine that if you were to write the application for your younger self now, you'd find it different. You'd smash it.
The role that I have now, part of the reason why I was offered the role was because I was a teacher.
Because it says a lot about you, right?
Exactly. They said, I remember my line manager saying to me, one of the reasons I wanted you in was because I knew that if you can handle, 30 kids at a time, teach 150 kids a week, you can manage 3 adults, and you can manage difficult conversations with a colleague, because you've had to manage far more challenging situations. And I think it's only probably been the last couple of years that I've gone, oh yeah, actually that was a really good point.
Yeah.
But I think figuring out what to do outside of teaching, I found quite hard, because it was hard to work out who to ask.
And what's out there.
Yeah, and what's out there, because the only people you know are other teachers, so then that can be quite difficult. Using the Teach First Ambassador Network was really helpful, to actually just ask people, what do you do? Or seeing jobs coming up on the Ambassador Network, I started Googling those organisations, or I don't think they do it anymore, but they used to. Teach First used to have this entrepreneur kind of opportunity. So it used to be for ambassadors, and if they had a really good idea of a charitable organisation they wanted, or a startup they wanted to kick off, they could apply for funding. And that was actually, in part from looking at that, how I found the Brilliant Club, because that was set up by ambassadors as well.
Oh, was it?
It was, but I think I must have applied to about 30 jobs before I landed my job at the Brilliant Club.
So were you doing job applications whilst teaching?
Yep.
And was that 30 applications? That's probably actually quite a big.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a huge amount of work. I was exhausted. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I knew that there was a tight deadline, because I thought, if I can't, I think the cut-off is May half term.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, if I can't find something by May half term, I have to hand in my notice by the May half term, or go for another year. Is one of the two. I didn't. That was it.
Or quit.
Yeah, or quit, and fingers crossed.
Yeah. But at that point, you weren't desperate to leave. You were.
No. I still enjoy.
You were wanting to teach, but you wanted something else as well.
Yeah, I was at that sort of stage where I enjoyed teaching, but I was doing a lot of work with trainee teachers. I was doing mentoring of trainees. I had people coming into the school and PGCEs. I had people coming in that were not necessarily starting teacher training, but were interested. And every time I was coming into those interactions, I was thinking, I really enjoy doing this. I really like teacher development. I find it really fun, and I want to do something more around that, and to sort of explore if that's an option. I think if the Brilliant Club if that role in the Brilliant Club wasn't there, I would have carried on at the school and carried on teaching for a bit longer. But that role, because the role that I took at the Brilliant Club was teacher training, or working with teacher training providers and supporting trainees through into teachers. I thought, oh, this sounds quite fun, something that I enjoy, and I'd like to look at a bit more.
So it lined up with what aspects you were currently enjoying.
Yeah. At
the time. Okay, so what is the Brilliant Club, and what did you do there?
Yeah.
And I suppose you've already told me what appealed to you, but what did you do then? What do they do?
So the Brilliant Club is it's an education charity. It was set up by 2 Teach First ambassadors. They have 2 programs. So one is the Scholars Programme, and one is the Researchers in Schools. And they're all about social mobility and helping disadvantaged students to get into, or to have the opportunity to have access to highly selective universities. They do that through their 2 programs. So the Scholars Programme, I call it's a little bit like the SAS. Like, they come in and then they hop out. So they have PhD graduates or PhD students who take an aspect of their PhD and create a 6-week course for students in primary schools or secondary schools, and they deliver it to a small group of children over 6 weeks, and those kids get to go to a highly selective university at the start to kick off the programme, and at the end to graduate, and they get their certificate of their course, and they get a score at the end, and it's like a first or a 2-1 or a 2-2. It's a really lovely, yeah, it's amazing. I highly recommend. any of you have, if you're teachers, look at the Brilliant Club. It's really good. But it's a really good, and they've had amazing impact on students, getting them into university. So the Researchers in Schools programme, it was a new programme when I started, and it was looking at how you could embed that kind of an idea, but in a more long-term approach. So we took PhD graduates and we partnered with teacher training providers in schools. We placed those teachers into schools to train to teach, and on top of which they ran a course similar to the Scholars Programme. So they took their PhD and they taught it to kids. They would often do education research in the school as well and deliver projects too. So it was, when I came in, a new programme, and it just sounded really exciting. It just sounded like a really cool thing to be a part of, because it just seemed really innovative and something that to have, one of the big things I saw when I was teaching was a lot of kids had never been to a university. It just seemed like a complete, not just an unattainable goal, but even just to go into the building, it wasn't for them. It was that idea of sort of social capital, that you're not from a community where you can go there, or you can even go into the building. It's not for you. It's for other people, but not for you. I can imagine, and you've had the same, there are kids that don't know what PhD is. They think a doctor is just medical. And they particularly focused at Researchers in Schools about science and maths. And being a science teacher, I thought, oh, this is amazing. Because one of the things I found challenging was that I was teaching all three sciences. I only have physics up to GCSE. I don't have A-level physics. I'm not a physics specialist, but I was teaching children that were phenomenally intelligent, and I just couldn't stretch them enough because I didn't have the knowledge to do that. So when I saw that role appear, I thought, brilliant, I want to apply for it and go and work there. And it meant I could still be in schools, but I could go and visit lots of schools. And rather than me as a class teacher teaching 150 kids, I was looking after 60 teachers at a time, and each teacher is looking after 150 kids. So then, not in a selfish way, but all of a sudden I'm enabling impact that goes a lot further than just me in one school, which was brilliant. And one of my absolute highlights of the role was going to we had a group of teachers in Bristol, and they had contacted, they'd done it all themselves. They'd contacted Bristol University, booked out a room, they'd coordinated amongst their schools to have a trip to take their students to the university. They all had a tour of the university, and then each of the teachers presented what their PhD was on, and each of the students presented their projects to each other, and they all had a little graduation. And the parents and carers also came to the university so they could talk about admissions and things. And it was just one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had, because there were parents there that had never been to university and were going, oh, I'd love for you to go and do this, and having an open conversation about it. So yeah, it was amazing.
That is really, really nice.
It was lovely.
With the PhD teachers, do they function as tutors, and are the kids selected?
So they are trainee teachers, so they have their own timetable, they have their own classes. They were working 3 days a week on their first year, because they had what we call a RIS day, which is where they would do their sort of project work and research and things, and they had their training day with their teacher training provider.
So it's another way into, it's a teaching training route,
yeah.
And it's encouraging academics to go, because I know that one of the issues is subject teachers not being represented. So, and even like you say, the way that triple science is, you're a science teacher even though you have a specialism, that's an issue. And I think it was the EEF who did some research and showed subject knowledge to be like the highest predictor of outcomes.
Yeah.
So it'd be good to get more sort of specialists into it. So that sounds really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the Brilliant Club. did you when you actually got into it, you obviously found it really enjoyable.
Yep.
Were you missing teaching?
I did miss teaching, definitely. I think I was quite lucky that I still got to teach, but I was teaching adults rather than teaching kids, so it meant I could still kind of keep a pulse on what was happening in education. And I think doing Teach First and their sort of training around coaching and facilitation and teaching kids meant that I had a lot of skills to go into then teaching adults how to teach. Strange. But yeah, teaching adults became slightly, I mean, it had its own challenges, but it was a sort of natural progression through, and it meant I wasn't just completely cut off from schools.
Yeah. And then, so that, I guess that moved into your next role, which was,
Yeah, at the
Chartered College of Teaching.
Yeah.
Teaching, training teachers.
Yeah. So the Chartered College of Teaching is the professional body for teachers. So there used to be one until 2012 or something, but it was one that you had to be a part of. So if you were a teacher, you had to be a part of your professional body. They took money out of your pay packet, and people got very annoyed about it, and it got disbanded. And in 2017, I think it was the Department for Education that decided we want to do this again, but we want to do it well, that benefits teachers. So it's now a sort of optional in. I'd been at the Brilliant Club for nearly 3 years, and felt it was just my natural time to move on and to do something else. And again, oddly enough, there are a lot of Teach First ambassadors in the Chartered College as well. Yeah. So I moved across and ended up, so I was the title was Member Engagement Manager, but it was essentially helping, they have about 35,000 teachers or people that support teachers within their body, and it was giving them the ability to access networks, events, research, to do their own research in schools, and then looking at trainee teachers and how does the college help trainees to kind of progress through teaching, because it's really hard. Teacher training is really difficult. It's a difficult one to navigate, and I think that what's been really exciting over the last couple of years is that there's been so much more of an emphasis on that teaching being an evidence-based profession, that actually it's one that has clout, that has rigour to it, but being able to support trainees and teachers across all levels with how do you access that, how do you implement it, and that was a lot of what that sort of role was about.
Yeah, it seems like there's lots of initiatives going into easing the process for teacher training, making it more appealing to graduates, and just trying to make it more of a, well, I would say there's initiatives into making it seem like more of an appealing and sustainable career option.
Yes.
But then there are also lots of things that are making it seem like less of an appealing career option. So there's like two kind of forces there.
It's almost like a clash of a paradox, because you have on the one side, I think that if you look at all the teacher training routes now, and if you look at schools in general, there is so much more emphasis on teacher wellbeing than there ever has been, and promoting teacher development and professional development, definitely more so than when I was going through teacher training. I think that teachers are being empowered a lot more to really push for what they want, and we're seeing a lot more career changes coming into teaching. So it's not just people stepping out from university and coming in, that has its own challenges, but now we have people coming in that have families, or people that have had a career break and are coming back into teaching, and so you can really see there's a lot of support, or beginnings of a lot of support being put in place. The challenge that we now have is on the flip side, that schools have a huge amount of pressure around performance and around targets, and data-driven approach, on top of which this pandemic is going to only increase the gap exponentially between the children that will have had access to Wi-Fi, that will have had a computer that was theirs that they could use all day, that will have had parents and carers that can support them with learning during the day as well, that will have had all of that in place, and those children that have not had any of that. And it's just going to put a huge, a lot of weight on the shoulders of people that have been in teaching and established for years, but especially to people that have maybe only just started, or have been sort of a year or 2 years. Because if you're a trainee teacher now, or an NQT, all you know at the moment is a fragmented landscape that has been in and out of a lockdown.
People have done their my fiancée has done her training year in COVID, and a large chunk of it was online. The profession has its problems. I would say there's a chronic shortage of teachers, and the reason I say that is because if you look at your average teacher's timetable, it's just too much. Like,
it's very heavy,
and that's the expectation, and there's no evidence that that's going to go away. And really, when it comes down to it, what's the problem is there's not enough teachers, or the system doesn't allow there to be enough teachers.
The system doesn't allow there to be enough teachers. I don't know if you know this, but maybe it's changed in the last couple of years, but there is a database that, so if you're a teacher training school or a teacher training body, so you're a university or a SCIT, an IT provider, you have this database, is it DMS? And it gives you an allocation of how many of each subject you can recruit. You're capped from the start of what you can do. And what I think sometimes that isn't taken into account is, yes, there's a national landscape of teacher training and of subject shortages, but region by region, community by community, that shortage is very, very different. So I have been to schools in areas where they had shortages of modern foreign language teachers, which I'd never heard of before, because there are, if you go to parts of Greater London, there are a dime a dozen, but I think it was in Kent, they were saying we're just struggling. Chemistry teachers, I knew of a school where they had got to a point where they were advertising an assistant head teacher role with chemistry teaching, because they couldn't recruit for one.
And that might be because if you've got a chemistry degree, you're less likely to be interested in teaching.
It just depends. It was just for that region they were struggling, but if you were to go to another location, they didn't have a problem. I think one of the challenges they had was that they were almost kind of sandwiched between a number of grammar schools, which made it quite difficult for them to recruit. But I definitely agree. I think it would be amazing to see a sort of teaching landscape in the future where there's a lot more flexibility and the enabling of teachers to be able to do more professional development, or to be given a bit more time.
More time.
Yeah, more time.
I think more time. More time.
More time would be great.
Who's going to do that? And then I guess this is all combined with it all culminates in the massive dropout rate that we see. I don't actually know the statistic. I've heard it quoted between 40 and 75% of teachers dropping out within 4 years.
Yeah, it's massively increased since when I was sort of going through it. It's quite a high one. It'd be really interesting to see what the return rate is, because
coming back into it after that.
Coming back in, because I wonder, I would never rule out not teaching again. For me personally, I still tutor because I really enjoy it. I'm still constantly chatting to everyone that I would get a hold of about education. I would never rule out, that I wouldn't ever go back to it, because it has a lot of positives to it as a career. And I think now there is so much more support for people coming back into teaching, because that's one of the things that always made me a bit nervous. Was I've got this great sort of ace card in my back pocket and I think the pandemic's a really good example of this. If I were to have lost my job, and my role wasn't tenable anymore at the charity that I'm at, I have a vocational qualification that I can fall back on if I needed to. But the fear was then, God, I haven't taught in a really long time, how do I go back into that? But I've seen there are so many different sort of supports out there for people coming back into teaching. I think I saw on one of the Teach First Facebook groups that they were having a workshop for coming back into teaching after a career break, and they had sort of a panel of guests to talk you through. And I think there are courses you can do for kind of re-entering back into the classroom. So I think it's very different now to where it was. There's definitely a high drop-off. Part of it, I think, is just that generationally we're a generation that job hops a lot more than I think we used to. It's just a thing that we do.
I think it is a stark statistic, but I suppose what you're saying partly is that it's not the whole story. You can come back, or I suppose you might be counted in that statistic, but you're still in education, supporting other teachers. So it's not like you just vanished.
No, exactly.
You're still there. You're still in education.
Yeah, exactly.
And I suppose the chartered college isn't. You're involved in supporting
trainees, yeah.
And early career teachers?
Trainees, early careers, all the way through to head teachers, exec head teachers, multi-academy trust CEOs, all the way through. And then we do work around lobbying, like policy change. So we do quite a lot in there. So there's a huge amount to sort of get your teeth into, and it means that we're still driving change. And I think it's almost like stepping out and looking at, like, the big picture is, I think personally, that education has to change because it's fragmented and it can be elitist, and it serves for some but not for all. And that's not just children, but that's for teachers, leaders, all the way through. The only way that we can change all of that is by hitting all the different levels. So that's not just going in at a grassroots and sort of being on the front line and improving the teaching that is provided, but it's also then looking right at the top as well and lobbying to change and to culminate teachers together and giving them a voice to say, actually, we're doing what we can, but these policies don't work for us either. Yeah. And that needs to change too. So I think it's being able to look at, dropping out of teaching doesn't mean that you're dropping out of education in its entirety. Yeah. You're just repositioning how you attack the problem.
The same problem. Or I mean, I suppose if you're talking about grassroots, you're fighting a losing battle. Like policy needs to change, and it sounds fascinating as well. This is a probably question that shows my ignorance more than anything, but what makes the chartered college different from a union?
So the difference between the chartered college and a union, this isn't your ignorance, this is like a really common question. It's a really, really good one.
Okay,
so a union is there to provide you with legal advice and guidance, and protect your rights as a worker, as a working teacher. So if you were to have an issue in your school, say for example that was like a HR issue or a pay issue, you would go to a union, and they might step in and provide you with sort of phone call support, how to tackle it. They might come in and be your representative. You will have union representatives in your school as well, and they will lobby when required to help. I would highly recommend anyone that's a teacher should be a part of a union. If you're not a political person, there are unions that are apolitical, and it means that you won't feel conflicted. But it's really important to be a part of them, and we will always support joining a union. The Chartered College of Teaching is a professional body, so we're not a legal representative for you. That's not the role that we take. What we do instead is we provide you with resources, tools and equipment to improve your teaching, and then at a sort of much higher level we lobby to change policy to improve teaching as well, and that's the environment that we sit in. So we fully support unions and we sit completely next to them, but we just do different jobs. Yeah.
Would you recommend
Yeah.
teacher training to someone who's at university like yourself when you didn't know what to do? Would you recommend teacher training?
Yes. At first, I think for the first couple of years when I came out, I would have said no, because you don't know what you're doing on the. I still remember being at the Christmas party in first year, singing along to Taylor Swift, going, "I'm 22," and then going to school on Monday and going, "Right, I've got to teach kids now." It was a very weird time. So I think until a couple of years ago, I would have been like, "No, that's a terrible idea." But the reason I would say yes coming out of university, but I'll say yes, but then I'll caveat it. So yes, because if you are somebody that is really passionate about education and passionate about communicating your expertise and your passion for your subject to other people to make them passionate, teaching is a great route into that. It gives you a huge wealth of skills and expertise, particularly about leadership, about being reactive, organisation. You will become one of the best people at time management. You will be able to handle complex, sensitive situations really well. So it really gears you up so that if you wanted to step out of the classroom, you're sitting with a toolbox of stuff. The caveat I would give to that is be sure that that's what you want to do, because it is hard. So do your research first and research the different training routes in to make sure that the one that you've picked is the one that you want to do and suits you best, because they are different and they will support different people's needs. I would always say that if one doesn't work out for you, that doesn't mean you're not cut out for teaching. It might just be that route wasn't the route for you. But I would always just do your research first before going in, because I mean, anyone that's done teacher training will say it's hard, and you'll have points where you're just like crying in a bathtub with a glass of wine, just thinking, why did I do this? And I guess the other is to sort of know that it's also fine if it's not for you. I think that's the thing sometimes people forget, is if you sign up to teacher training, you get, and I think Teach First in particular, because you're told, you're top graduates, really intelligent, really smart, successful, everything else, which graduates that go into Teach First absolutely are. Then when you go into the training program and you start to struggle, it can be very difficult to tell people that you're struggling because you feel like a failure. Yeah,
you almost can't have too much of an ego, actually.
Yeah, in a way, and so it can become very difficult. It's almost sort of saying it's okay if this isn't for you, or if it's not for you right now. That's fine. It's not that you haven't failed if you say, do you know what, for me, I need a bit more time before I then go and do teacher training, is also okay. Because I know, certainly from friends of mine that have gone through it, and from my cohort and everything, there were people that it wasn't for them, and they've gone on and had amazing careers, or the route wasn't for them and now they're teachers, but they did it in a different way, or they trained later in their lives because it just wasn't the right time for them. But for some of them, it was just really hard to tell anyone that they were struggling, because it was almost that mentality of, I'm just going to tell everyone I'm just really smashing it. I'm doing so well.
I think that's reasonable advice.
Yeah.
I think, to research it and maybe not necessarily do it straight away. But I think your story, your example is a good one that, like, teaching has been good for you.
Teaching's been amazing for me. Honestly, I wouldn't be where I am now without Teach First, because the roles that I've had have only been there because people that had done Teach First were innovative and creative and made their own charities, and that enabled me to come and work for them. I've only been able to secure the role that I'm in now because I've had that experience of teaching, so now I'm a good leader and a good manager. I don't think I would have been able to have done that and to have excelled to where I am now if I hadn't have done teaching at the start of it. So I'll forever be grateful for doing Teach First. I think if I was to turn back the clock, and if I could sort of see myself just before I got that phone call and said, look, this is what the 2 years of Teach First are going to be like, and there will be points that are really hard, but this is where you'll be when you're older. This will be, where you are when you're older. do you want to do it? I would still, I wouldn't change anything. I'd do it all over again.
That's good. Would you were saying people who've made their own charities? Would you ever just make your own charity or your own initiative or your own?
Yeah, I think that'd be like that. One of my dreams would be to have my own education charity. It would definitely still be sat around social mobility and university access, I think. But that would definitely be a dream of mine. Would be amazing to do. God only knows how, but
one day.
One day, yeah, one day.
What about the more immediate future for you? What's your future? Next steps, I guess, or next.
I guess future next steps for me is I would really like to stay working for education charities. I love being a part of this landscape and being a part of the sphere. I would really like to focus into early career teachers and trainee teachers, because it's something that I have empathy for, but I think there's just such a wealth of opportunity and just untapped potential in there, and being able to give them holistic, well-rounded support, because it is a scary world to navigate. Even just little things like career progression in teaching is very, very different to career progression outside of it. And it can be really hard to figure it out.
I mean, I've made a podcast to try and
yeah.
Out, so it's true.
So I would definitely really like to stay within this kind of a realm and then just see where it takes me, I guess.
Yeah. If there's a classroom teacher who's listened to this and they thought, I want to go into an educational charity.
Yeah.
I want a job in an educational charity. What barriers might they face, and what advice could you give to them for like how to overcome that and how to get into that?
Okay. I think barriers that they might face if you're a classroom teacher. If you're a classroom teacher like I was, and you were still sort of fairly early on in your career, or younger person, I think the biggest barrier was self-confidence and understanding translatable skills. And that was the thing that I certainly found the hardest. I found it really difficult to look at what I was doing and be able to map out how that would match a career in anything that wasn't teaching. That was probably the hardest thing that I had. And I think the other was figuring out what education charities were out there.
Yeah.
And just understanding what the options were, I think, were the two biggest ones. Ways to overcome it is I would draw on your networks. So hopefully your school is very supportive. If you have a supportive school and you have supportive colleagues, then you can absolutely have an honest conversation with them and say, I'm really interested in education charities. How would I go about that and go that way? If you don't feel comfortable doing that, contact your other networks. So the Teach First Facebook group is a great in route if you are going through Teach First. Otherwise, there will be ambassador networks for other teacher training routes that you can reach out to. Alternatively, reaching out to your skit lead is a good way to do it as well, because they like to kind of keep in contact with where people are. And I guess Google, it sounds really silly, but just Google education charities and start to read what's there and what kind of things people might be looking for. Or I mean, because this was the first time I properly applied for a job that wasn't a teacher job. I googled CV, cover letter, just because I wasn't entirely sure how that was meant to look. Then I asked my mum. She helped. My mum helped, and it just helped to kind of figure out what was there. And I think the other big one is specifically for education charities. Education as a whole, and we know teaching is a community where everyone wants to help everybody else. I think it's one of the best parts of teaching is that if you're a teacher, you're almost like in a bond with all other teachers. It's like an unspoken family. The moment you mention, I used to be a teacher, you're in. You're a part of it, and your school is also another like big family. But education is exactly the same. And if you were to reach out to an education charity and email them and say, hi, my name is da da da, I'm really interested in learning more about education charities, can you tell me a bit more? They would be more than happy to tell you, because teachers are who they want to reach out to. So be brave and put yourself out there. I think a lot of it is just being confident and not being afraid of, maybe somebody won't reply, but maybe somebody will. That's what I would recommend.
I think that's great advice. I think just in terms of the cover letter, I feel like if you were to Google a cover letter, you'll get something fairly generic.
Mm-hmm.
Are there just a few buzzwords that you could recommend for like a teacher?
Yeah, for
transferable skills, that would be good.
Yeah, so I think the big one is when it comes to education charities, or charities in general, the most important thing to them is that you care about their mission and that you align with their vision and values. That's really important to them, because that's everything that they're about. The why of a charity is, if it's Teach First, their why is that they want a fair education for everyone. So that's what you want to convey within your cover letter, is that that's how you align. And I think this is where teaching to education charities is a really nice progression across, because if you can say that you have a commitment to education, a commitment to improving the lives of children, that you have established extracurricular activities because you recognise education is a holistic approach and not just your 1 hour in the classroom. Those kind of buzzwords work really well when you're writing a cover letter towards an education charity. The other big one is being solutions focused, being reactive, and being able to hit the ground running and to work to tight deadlines. Because if you're in an education charity, it is fast paced. But if you're a teacher, you're always juggling things, even in a classroom. And it's a really good example, actually. If you're a teacher, you've got 30 kids and all 30 children have a different need that you will need to meet within that hour, and you are one person, on top of which you have your own goals that you have to achieve. So being able to manage and juggle all of that, if you were to put that into a cover letter or into an interview answer, that's a brilliant transferable skill. That'd be my advice.
Great advice. Love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I think I have asked you everything I wanted to ask you. So I want to say thank you so much. Like, you've been an amazing guest. Really informative. Very, very informative. I'm sure whoever's listening to this will really, really benefit from that. If somebody wanted to get in contact with you or find out more about you or anything like that, where can people find you? Or
so they can find me on Facebook. It's Alex Rasheen. I'll put the Brilliant Club and the Chartered College in the description as well. Lovely. So Facebook, Instagram. If you have ping me a message on Instagram. I don't know how these young kids do this nowadays. And I also have a relatively inactive Twitter, and I'm on LinkedIn. So if anybody wants any advice around transitioning into education charities, more than happy to have a chat with people about it, because I think it's just I've massively benefited from doing it, so I'd love to help other people. Cool. Thank you very much. And that's the end of